What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 1 of Awesome. I'm super stoked to be starting this podcast. And what better to start it out with than my testimony? On Awesome, we will be diving into everything faith, sport, lifestyle, injury. And to title this testimony, we're going to go with God, Gymnastics, and Gold. The pursuit of glory. And this will be a story about how God revealed himself to me through sport and injury. I will be reading it off of this script because it is fairly long. And so full disclaimer, I'm not going off the top of the head. This is something that's been planned out. So without further ado, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you all for joining me here today as we dive into my journey of finding God through pursuing my highest endeavors of athletics. This career of mine all started at the age of 4 when I first tried gymnastics, but wouldn't continue until I was 6. At the age of 6, when I tried it for the second time, I fell deeply in love with what the sport had to offer. A never-ending pursuit of becoming better. A limitless amount of skills and ability to show off in front of everyone. As a kid who loved and thrived under the spotlight, this was nothing short of a dream come true. I pursued gymnastics with all my heart and quickly found that I had 2 large goals ahead of me. One would be to get a full ride to college, and the other would be to win the Olympics. Little did I know, the journey I had set myself upon would lead to a concussion at the age of just 8 years old. A little backstep. I grew up attending St. Paul Orthodox Church in Dearborn, Michigan. The building has now been given back to God, so if you're looking for it online right now, that's why you cannot find it. I do remember one moment when we had a kids show and tell at church, and I brought my mushroom, it's a pommel horse trainer for those who don't know, and showed the church my routine. Back to the story. At the age of 9, gymnastics became a priority for me and my sister, and it became really hard for my parents to keep up with that schedule and also take us to church. My mom gave us the decision that if we wanted to keep going, we could, and if we didn't want to keep going, we didn't have to. And we both decided that we wanted to spend Sundays sleeping in and getting ready for the week of training ahead. I was too young to know it at the time or even understand who God was, but this was my first true recollection of placing my sport in place of our Lord. Gymnastics would be at the top of my altar for a while after that, and even sometimes to this day it still is. By placing gymnastics at the top, it became my identity everywhere I went. At school, I was a gymnast. At church, which I wouldn't attend for a long time, I was a gymnast. At home, I was a gymnast. At the gym, well, I think you can guess it, I was a gymnast. Carrying the identity of being a gymnast and holding my success near to my heart made me feel good because it gave me some sort of validity in the eyes of others. Well, it gave me some sort of validity. I also had my first experience of persecution for being a gymnast. I got made fun of at school as a kid because people simply didn't understand. They would relay the thoughts that their parents had fed them about the sport, such as all male gymnasts being gay. This persecution just made me want to get better at my sport and prove that I was better than all of them. At this point now, I began to feed on the resentment I had towards those kids that were making me feel less than. I would use their words to propel me higher so I could step on them in the end. This is where my relationship with gymnastics became even more toxic than it was before. As I entered into middle school, everyone started to grow up a bit, and I started to get that gymnastics physique we all know of. For the same thing I was being made fun of from the kids at my school, they started praising me because I looked a certain way, and gymnastics made me stronger than they could have imagined for a kid my size. This really got to my head and let me think that I was naturally better than my peers and blinded me to the work that it took to get there. I would later see the same lesson with social media by the time I was in college, but we'll save that story for later. Anyway, I thought I was better than these kids around me, as well as received validation from girls for the first time in my life. At this point, just before high school, my ego was inflating faster than I could keep up with. Just in time for me to utilize the body gymnastics had given me to propel my internet fame on social media. All this going on made me lose sight of one of my biggest dreams, of going to and winning the Olympics. It was still in the back of my head, but wasn't the priority anymore than having fun and enjoying the success I had already gained. My talent was still very noticed, and I had many full-ride offers and chose to come to Penn State for a reason I can't explain other than as soon as I stepped onto the campus, I knew it was the place I had to be. This took the people in my corner on a bit of a turn, as I was a Michigan fan my whole life and had the opportunity to be a Wolverine as well. I came to Penn State as the third-ranked gymnast of my class, as well as being the number one class in the country out of every single team. I thought I was what you would call him. College would just inflate my ego even more in the beginning, and with everyone around me persuading me to take advantage of my status and use it for personal pleasure, I fell into this trap that now I see clearly that Satan used to deceive me, as well as bring many others down with me. With the influence I had, also came a responsibility I was not yet aware of, to keep upright a good integrity by example, because those around me would inevitably follow. Anyway, I wandered far from that upright path, and the further I got, the less I was able to make a sound decision, or any decision at that. I was following the path of most pleasure and least pain, or struggle, which would inevitably lead me to the straight opposite, being a life filled with pain and struggle and little to no pleasure. Subconsciously, I knew that the life I was living wasn't virtuous or going to bring me to my highest goals. I also wanted to believe that I was working hard enough, that I was able to achieve anything, no matter what, because that's what I was being told. Work hard and you can do exactly what you want. You see, the lie there is you can't actually do exactly what you want. You can sometimes if you live accordingly and work just, but if you don't, however, there's no way you could ever see the pinnacle of the idea that you have come to existence. I surely didn't, because I spent lots of time, or actually most of my time, not aiming properly. I did work hard in the gym, but most likely with a bad attitude. I only wanted to work hard or even showed glimpses of my potential when I felt good. A life led by feelings is a life that is unstable. We will always feel many different things in a given day, so if we are without a rock, we are bound to sway. And sway I did from one feeling to the next. It was almost as if I enjoyed the major swings, the highs, the high highs, and the low lows, even though, deep down, I couldn't stand to look at myself in the mirror. It was my sophomore year that I had began orienting myself in a manner that was at least a bit more admirable. I wanted less to do with the parties and more to do with the trophies that were to fill my shelves. I wanted gold, and I wanted to be praised as the best. I wanted everyone to know my name. I wanted anything but to be called the same. So my walk got better and the results did show, but again my ego would grow. And then I would find myself 2 concussions more, one on the high bar and one on the floor. 6 months apart, this was no good sign. This year was also my closest I had ever been to making the senior national team. My Winter Cup performance was good, not great, and led me to be the first guy out of the team. This fueled me for the rest of the season, and to get my first All-American, but then to get a 6th concussion the week between classics and champs, which at classics I came 4th place. So junior year began for me, coming off a concussion, but also at my most successful year as a gymnast and as an NIL earner thus far. I was determined, and I was working harder than I'd ever worked before. I knew that I was close, and I knew I felt like I deserved to be on national team. Clearly, I didn't deserve to be on national team. Otherwise, I would have been on national team, and that was something that I just couldn't accept. Either way, I would work harder than I'd ever worked before, and I wasn't going to let anything get in my way. I wanted this goal so badly that I'd even let it hurt my relationship with my girlfriend. We would argue and we would fight over stupid things, and mainly it stemmed from me putting my career and my future on top of hers. Me deciding that I was more important and she was supposed to just help me get there. Me thinking that it was all about me. It was always me. It went as far as to end in a breakup, and I decided to do this because I felt I had to. Our relationship had gotten so bad because we couldn't even see each other in truth. We didn't even know who each other were when we were really just looking in a mirror at the same time. Either way, if the relationship wanted to continue ever or not, with us hating each other, I knew I had to end it there, so I ended it. I remember vividly that night. If you guys have been following me for a while, you've seen the video of me screaming in my car that I posted on Mother's Day of 2023. It's gone now, but anyway. But that video was actually taken the day I broke up with my girlfriend. I was sitting in my car, bawling my eyes out, and I started cursing out God, telling him I was going to do this or that or the other thing, all these bad things that I was going to indulge in. But this was the first time I talked to God in probably 7 years. And he told me to call my coach, Randy. I had no idea why I would call Randy, but I knew I had to do it, so I did. He took me under his wing and got me through these next few weeks and months, and honestly to where I'm at now, but I had no idea the journey I'd set myself on. I knew I had made the right decision and that I had to make national team, and I decided that if I just made national team that year, that all my problems would go away, and that she would see that I was who I said I was, and that I was an honorable man. I was trying to prove it to myself as well as her at the same time. Lo and behold, we come to Winter Cup 2023, my 7th meet of the year. Leading up to the meet was very hard for me because obviously I was a mess. I'd just broken up with the love of my life and I couldn't even train some days. Either way, we got to the competition and I'm terrified that I'm not going to make national team. I didn't know it, but it's clear to see now that I was terrified. I was having nightmares 5 days before the competition. I had a dream that my grip snapped, and just the day before the competition, I woke up from a nightmare of me snapping my Achilles. It was clear that my mind was a wreck and I was in danger to my own mind. I competed day 1 and I had a few falls and I was quite embarrassed. I ended up with the score of 77 and I was 13th place after day 1. I was also number 7. Day 2, I was determined, and seeing those 3 sevens, I decided it was my meet. I decided that I was going to be the lucky one. I was going to be the one that made national team. And once I saw this, and I was a big fan of XXXTentacion at the time, I had the song 777 on repeat. Probably not a very good song choice if you're trying to have a calm mind in a steady competition. Anyway, the 7th event of the competition, because it was event 1 of day 2, would be rings. And I had new grips on because I saw my teammate Matt Cormier snap his ring grip on the first day of competition. I thought it was a dream come true. I saw his grip break, so I had to put on new ones so mine wouldn't do the same. Just 5 minutes before the competition, on the one-touch warm-up, my grip snapped. I flipped all the way to my back. I had no idea where I was in the air, and this resulted in my 7th concussion. Now it seemed like the day that everything will go my way and everything will get better. I forced into becoming the day that, well, honestly, I didn't force anything. I tried to force it to go my way, but God decided to strip all of it away from me. So having a concussion, I wasn't allowed to post on social media, so my ever-dying brand continued to dwindle even more. And my gymnastics career, well, they were telling me it was over. I remember driving my car home one day from a training appointment and looking down and seeing that I had 77,777 miles in my car, and I was confused. And at this moment, I knew God was real. You know, it sounds crazy, but I was 7 weeks away from NCAAs when the concussion happened, and I was 77 days away from Mother's Day. All this is important, you'll find out later, but seeing all these numbers made me kind of go crazy and realize I needed to change, but I didn't really change at first. After 5 weeks, the most intense vestibular therapy and brain rehab that I'd ever experienced with some of the best trainers I believe to be in the world. We were just 2 weeks away from NCAAs and they decided that I could do handstands and pommel horse. This was huge because we had just came second at Big Tens and we were only a 1 point higher pommel horse score to winning the meet. So I did about 3 routines before NCAAs and I did a really easy routine because we needed something that I could hit guaranteed. My coaches trusted me and they put me in the lineup. Day 1 was a little bit rough, but I got through and we qualified to day 2, which would have been my Grandpa Burke's 100th birthday. I decided that day that this was a gift for him. All it was him seeing me do exactly what he wanted to see me do. I was focused on him being in heaven and nothing else. I didn't care about the team. I didn't care about myself, even my performance or the award that would come after. I was just thinking about him. I wanted to represent him well and do justice by his name and my bloodline. And I never felt more prepared for a moment in my life, and I enjoyed every single bit of it. It was complete tunnel vision in that moment when the judge saluted me. I smiled and saluted, and I looked down at the horse and said, "Happy birthday, Grandpa." In that moment, I did the most stunning routine I'd ever done, the highest execution of the entire meet, and it felt like I hadn't moved a muscle. I got down from the podium and I told my coach, Randy, "I don't feel like I did it." And he said, "I understand." I don't understand how he could have understood because, well, I didn't even understand myself. Now I understand, and this kind of relates to John 13:7, which was also my number and placement at Winter Cup. John 13:7. Yeshua answered him, "You don't understand yet what I'm doing, but in time you will understand." On which is also something Randy said when I got the 7th concussion, and we were trying to decide if I was okay to compete, and I said, "I think I'm okay." And he said, "We have bigger plans." I didn't understand what kind of plans he was talking about. I thought he was talking about the Olympics, but his plans were always heavenward. Anyways, that would end up being my 8th place All-American and would actually be my first Instagram post in 7 weeks since the concussion after I vowed to give it up till I understood. And I didn't understand, but I understood something. And that was that if you deny the things that you want in your life, you might just find a glimpse of hope. You might just find a glimpse of what true glory is and what true purpose actually means. I continued to not live a very virtuous life, and honestly, at first, this just made my ego 10 times bigger. I went home that summer thinking I was the coolest person in the world and that somehow I was better than everyone else. We were about a year away from the Olympics, and this became a vision that I had in my head. But now we would come up to Mother's Day, May 15th, 2023, and my mom would let me know that I was not living the life of virtue that would lead me to any of my goals. I didn't want to hear it, and I didn't want to hear it because it hurt. And it hurt because it was true. I had conversations with my sister that would be me and her sitting in the car and her crying to me, telling me I was giving up my life and that everything I'd ever worked for I was just throwing away. My ego was so big that I couldn't even understand that she was telling me the truth. I wanted to believe that I was going to reach my goals no matter what, and that however I did it, I would do it. Soon enough, Frederick Richard would hit me up and say, "Hey, do you want to make some content?" And I would say, "Yeah." I spent some time with him in a day, an entire day with him creating content, and it was a great time. And through doing that, I was able to see and pick his brain and how he was doing it. It was very apparent to me that he was the hardest working person in the entire country, at least in the sport of gymnastics, maybe in everything, and opened my eyes that maybe I wasn't doing everything that I could to reach my goals. And if I wasn't doing that, and that my competitors were, then there was probably no way I was going to make it to the Olympics. So this invoked the change that I needed. I started to read and I started to write to track my progress and track my habits. It started with Atomic Habits, and I'd read a few books before, Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life and Beyond Order that year as well, which would be the first 2 books I read on my own accord. But then Atomic Habits would give me a process to actually change. So I thank James Clear for that. And if you ever see this, shout out to James Clear and shout out to Fred. I returned to Penn State that summer with a mindset that I needed to do better, and I needed to make those around me better, and not just that I needed to, but I could somehow, in some way, just by making tiny changes. I remember one Saturday night we were with the team having fun partying, and I realized that there were some people around me that probably didn't want to be doing what they were doing, and I felt this deep desire to want to change the team, to want to fix the team so they could feel comfortable living out their faith. I realized that if the team had to change, well, it was probably my fault that they had to change. And if it was my fault, that meant the only way it was going to change was if I changed. So the next day would have been the first day I ever stepped into the church because I wanted to go to church. So I went to Holy Trinity, which is our local Orthodox church in State College, and they graciously took me in. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I knew I was in the right place the day I stepped in. That first Sunday morning I came in, as I walked in my freshman year competition warm-up suit, almost even wearing a hat into the church. Still, I don't have it right, but I started to give up the things that I knew weren't helping me reach my goals within 2 months. It was a complete life 180, and this was very painful for my ever-corrupted soul. I also had began attending a Bible study with Penn State Christian Athletics, and I would find a family in all of them. I remember one of the first sessions I attended, we were learning about fear, and 2 Timothy 1-7, we would learn that Jesus gives us a sound mind and a sound spirit and courage and strength, and not the spirit of fear, which comes from the devil. And I remember the special thing that we learned that night from McKenna was, if you step into the fear merry-go-round, you will be certain to be led by fear, and stuff just won't go right. And I had seen that in my life, and it was weird with the numbers for me. But the first 7, I stepped into that fear. And then at U.S. Classics, I was using those grips that I was afraid would break, that I didn't wear on rings that first go around. And I trusted that in that competition at U.S. Classics a few months later, that if they broke, it was for a greater purpose. So I stepped into the courage that God gave me, and lo and behold, their grips did not break, and I landed on my feet. It led me to feelings I hadn't felt before, and all to go to bed at 9:30, not really having any friends, and waking up at 6:30 for a goal I couldn't see. I felt like I was going crazy, and I almost felt depressed at times. These feelings with seeing everything else around me and quickly led me to a very harsh fall about 4 months later. I would start drinking and indulging in other things that I don't even want to talk about, but how I've fallen, all the grace that had been given to me would quickly seem to evaporate with injuries. My elbow started to hurt, and then I destroyed my back, and this was my senior year. Granted, I did have a 5th year in my back pocket, but this would have been my last year had I not had that. And still I couldn't get it right. So I began my senior year injured and lost and confused. Soon I would cut out all the bad activities and return to the church after about 2 months outside of that. And through the Bible studies that I had been attending that entire senior year and the books that I had been reading and the Bible, I would have a complete destruction of my ego. This was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, and I remember a special verse to me is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not into thy own understanding. Acknowledge him in all thy paths, and he shall direct them. This is the memory verse which we were tasked to inscribe into our hearts with the Bible study that was led by my coach. And this would lead me to understand that the Bible wasn't about me, and that what I was reading about Daniel and the prophecy of the 77s didn't have anything to do with me, even though 62 weeks, 62 weeks, after my concussion was Orthodox Easter, and the Messiah would return in that 70 weeks after the concussion, which felt like the most holy would be anointed, was the Olympic trials. So I put myself in the place of where God is supposed to be, just as many of us do every single day when we choose our will over his, or we choose the devil's will over his. Idolatry at its finest. So my heart would be softened. In that moment it changed for me. From going to church and living a life of virtue so I could reach my goals to, I'm going to reach my goals so I can glorify Jesus at the top. And I thought that was exactly what it was about. I thought, yep, I'm going to reach my goals and tell everyone about Jesus because he needs me to do that. Still, I was lost. But I was finding a way. And Jesus was paving it for me. I prayed a lot, and I kept going to church, and eventually I saw the most light I had ever seen at Big Tens when I kept praying, and to be shown the path to becoming a Big Ten champion. I remember day 1 wasn't great, but I still had 2 more chances on pommel horse and on parallel bars and on high bar. That night I was writing in my journal, and I remembered the poem was something about, I felt short but I'm proud. And one of my fans ended up sending me a Bible verse that night in Peter. I don't remember exactly where it was, but something along the lines that God resists the proud. So immediately I realized that my name is Michael, which means who is like God. And I had some sort of ego tied to the identity of my name. But my middle name was Paul, which means to be humble. And that I was forgetting to be humble. So I realized in that moment that no one could be first place. Even if we stood atop the podium, there was a reason that we were there. And that reason was Jesus. And Jesus was above us. And the reason that we got there. And I had this distinct vision of me standing on the podium and pointing up. And I could actually see Jesus floating above me in the form of the Holy Spirit. Or maybe it was my guardian angel. Either way, I knew that I was being led by the Spirit. And parallel bars didn't go my way. And I realized that I still had one more chance. I also realized that if I was going to become the Big Ten champion, and this is me realizing that I was already on the path to becoming that the routine I was about to do would be effortless and everything would go exactly according. So at that moment I said, what do I need to do? And I remembered I just need to do exactly what I do every day. So I didn't try to black out everyone around me. I just got in my zone. I closed my eyes, I visualized my routine, and I felt this presence, this aura that I couldn't really explain other than I already felt like I knew I was going to do a perfect routine. I remember chalking up, and I remember a piece of advice that my dad had given me was to do this one for me. Not for him, not for my team, not for my coaches, but for me. And similarly, in a book I'd read by Kristen Butler, The Comfort Zone, I realized that I was doing this not only for me right now, but for my 80-year-old self and my 8-year-old self. And I remembered my expanded self name, and I decided I was going to do it for him. And all of a sudden, I realized in this presence of self and of God, of awareness of eternity, of pure peace and presence, I did that routine. I caught my releases quite far, someone would say, but I caught them, and I stuck my dismount. Oh, it was electric, and I bear hugged both of my coaches and got the gold medal. I got the gold medal and I went home, and I was so excited and remember praying to God that He would make me humble, which is a very dangerous prayer to pray if you don't know it's about to happen. You see, if you pray to be humbled, God will humble you. 2 weeks later was NCAAs, and all I knew was I wanted to see the path to becoming an NCAA champion. Well, that didn't go well for me. I was led by fear of not becoming the champion and not making it to U.S. championships and to the Olympic trials. I was led by so much fear that I shot myself in the foot and landed on my face many, many times. I was devastated knowing that my path to the Olympics was over. I was devastated, and I felt like I had done everything in my power to make it go my way, even though I knew I'd fallen short many times. I felt forsaken by God, and I remember screaming and crying in my hotel room. Why, why, why? Very similar to the screaming and shouting I did in my car the night I broke up with my girlfriend. I called one of my friends that night, and he brought me to reality, letting me know that I still had a family, and that I still had food to eat, and that I was healthy, and that I had friends that cared about me. So that night when I journaled, I remember I was going from every time, which was another thing I shouted. Every time I fall. And every time I fall, God picks me up. Every time I cry, He wipes my tear, and so on. So ending my senior year on a high note, with having a huge high in the middle, left me with an unsatisfied feeling. Because the main goal was to make it to the Olympics, and that wouldn't happen. So I knew that summer was for me to work harder than I've ever worked and to prepare for the rest of my career that I was planning to live out. I worked very hard in the gym, but I also enjoyed myself this summer, got a little off track, and returned to school with a torn labrum. It was probably torn many years before, but it was really bad when I got back, to the point that when I did a skill on high bar, and I ripped off the bar, I couldn't move my arm for the next week. So we got the MRI and found out it was torn. And I'm faced with the decision to either get surgery or to continue for this next year and the foreseeable future and rehab through it and ignore the pain. I decided I didn't want to get the surgery as much as I couldn't get it, so I was going to take the rehab. The worst part about all this was I didn't attend church one time the entire first semester. And some of you might be saying the Bible doesn't say to go to church. It does. And without the church, we don't have the Bible. And we have the Bible. So we need the church. Without going to church, we can't actually understand the Bible. Either way, I had my last chance to do well, and it felt like I was giving up. I was enjoying the pleasures of the world, and I had no excuse for it again. Probably living in fear of, I will never get this moment again, of a college student, so I'm going to enjoy it. Enjoy it as you will, because you will enjoy it as you decide. But true joy cannot be without God. And I was very absent, so I entered the season not at full strength, but had gotten clean again and started going to church. Slowly, my shoulder would start to get stronger as I stopped drinking the alcohol and going to the bars and staying up late. But there was still lack of hope for me to do all 6 events by NCAAs. I was doing really good, and the day before our dual meet against Michigan, I missed my hand on a pommel horse dismount and sprained my AC joint on my torn shoulder. I was out for a month, and this was a very bad sprain. But to be out for only a month was a blessing, honestly. The torn AC joint was a blessing too, because that week I remembered learning about Genesis 22, about Abraham and how he was called to sacrifice Isaac. And I talked to Timotheus Pope, our speaker, that night, and I said, hey man, I don't know how I'm supposed to honestly give up my career to God, and I'm supposed to, give up all these things to him, my health, my life, and I told him about my testimony and how I was competing so I could glorify God, and he said, hey man, it's not about this, so God, it's not about that, so God, it's about God because God, for God, so God. It's about being with Jesus to be with Jesus. It's not about doing gymnastics so you could be with Jesus. He doesn't even care if you do gymnastics or not. He just wants you to be with him. And I remember those next 2 days, I was praying to God, how do I honestly tell you to take my career? How do I honestly tell you to take my health? And I said, well, I just have to tell you to take my whole life. And I remember looking up into the mirror, and that moment, I had a very scared look on my face because I knew I wasn't ready for him to take my life. I didn't feel like I was worthy of being met with God, so then when I hurt my shoulder, I realized that it wasn't in my hands. He did take my health into his hands, and he saved my soul once again. This time I think I understood him the best I'd ever understood him, and that it wasn't about anything that I was doing in my worldly life, but that it was all about my spirit, and everything that he could have done for me and everything that had happened in my worldly life was actually in aid of how he can help my spirit. That I couldn't do anything on this earth to make him happier other than just spending time with him. With a hurt shoulder and another month off, all I could do was spend time with him and pray and trust and do my rehab in prayer. This is when I learned that you can train in prayer. You can bring Jesus into the gym, and it can be without idolatry of wanting him to help you so you can win. So yeah, guys, pardon the stumbling. I need to revise this. I will be posting the text version at some point on the Awesome website. We will be getting an email list together, so go sign up for the email list. Send an email to mj@awesome.co. Go check out awesome.co, and stay tuned for the second episode next week, which will be God and injury. Kind of similar to how this one goes, but more along the lines of diving deep into those injuries, and hopefully giving you guys some insight. So super excited to be starting Awesome. A little backstory: Awesome is the number 8 in Macedonian. And why the number 8? Because today, 7-8, we move from the last day of the week to the first day of the next week. The 8th day, the same as the first day, that step beyond, that step into eternity. It also looks like an hourglass, and at the center of that hourglass is the present moment, the only time we actually have. We can't see what's above us, what's beyond, or what this moment has to offer, and what has already happened we can see, but we will never actually get to touch it again. So the number 8, Awesome, it means Jesus. It means stepping into eternity in faith, and it means the present moment. It's the journey, not the destination. The destination actually is only found in the journey. So with that being said, peace, love, and as always, be eternal. Let's go, baby.